All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Renee Barassa, and welcome to our webinar. I'm the Director of Communications and Education here at the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin. We call ourselves ICPRB. We are happy you are here for today's webinar, The Future of Water, excuse me, the Future of Water in the DC metro area. It is one of a series of webinars celebrating ICPRB's 85th anniversary. We have one more coming up on the 18th that will discuss the history and current state of the North Branch Potomac. You can check out our YouTube page for the recording of any previous webinars. And if you'd like to sign up for a future webinar, you can visit potomacriver.org/webinars. Next slide, please. And this is kind of exciting. This is hot off the presses. You're one of the first ones to hear about some additional webinars that we are announcing that are in celebration of Winter Salt Awareness Week at the end of January. We have two short, we're calling them mini webinars. They're only half-hour long. The first one is specifically for residents, people that that salt their own sidewalks or take care of their own winter maintenance. And then the second one on January 23rd is for HOAs and property managers and that audience. And our attendees will also have the chance to win some fun swag at the end of the event. So if you want to sign up for those, you can also find the links at potomacriver.org/webinars. Next slide, please. To prevent distractions, you will not have the ability to come off mute or turn on your video during the presentation. However, once the presentation is over, we will change the settings and you will be able to come off mute and turn your video on to ask a question. If you think of a question in the meantime, please feel free to put it in the chat and we will address it in the end. And again, all of our webinars are being recorded and you can find them on the YouTube channel, and we'll also send out a link if you registered for this, this meeting. We'll send out a link probably by the end of today. All right, I am going to pull up a fun poll. While it's launching, I'm going to read you the question. On average, the Metro DC area uses 445 million gallons of water a day. That's called an MGD. The region hit a new all-time peak during the height of COVID. How many million gallons of water did the region use on July 20th, 2020? We're trying to get you in the spirit of thinking about water supply. And while you're thinking about the answer, I'll introduce our speaker for today's webinar. Our speaker is Dr. Sherry Schultz. She is the Director of Operations for the Section for Cooperative Water Supply Operations on the Potomac, also called Co-op, at ICPRB. We have a lot of acronyms today, so if you get lost or get confused, please put something in the chat and we'll try to clarify. Sherry's department provides support to the Washington metropolitan area's regional water supply system, which includes suppliers in Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. She is responsible for water demand and availability forecasts for the region, which is what you'll hear about today. And she's also responsible for management of metropolitan area water supplies and operations during periods of drought. With that, I'm going to pass it along to ICPRB's Executive Director, Michael Nardolilli, who will answer the poll question for you.
Thank you very much, Renee. I'm Mike Nardolilli. I'm the Executive Director of ICPRB. And the answer to the question is the 643 number, and I think that most of you got the answer correct. So it was sort of odd that it was in the middle of COVID that we hit a high water mark, but that's the answer. So anyway, I'd just like to start off with giving a little overview of ICPRB before I turn it over to Dr. Sherry Schultz. So first of all, where are we? We're in the Potomac River watershed, and as you can see by that map, we are also part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. About 25% of the freshwater flow into the bay comes from the Potomac River. 50% comes from the Susquehanna, and the rest is the smaller tributaries such as the James. On the left-hand side, you see a map showing the cities that are in the watershed, and then also the north branch of the Potomac River, which is where you go out and you can get to the Fairfax Stone, which is considered to be the origin of the Potomac River. Next slide. So who are we? We're approved by Congress in 1940 as an interstate compact, really for the purpose of controlling or rendering unobjectionable the pollution of the waters of the said Potomac drainage area by sewage, industrial, and other wastes. By the time 1940 rolled around, the once pristine Potomac River had turned into an open sewer. Congress was concerned, but so were the local, the jurisdictions that surround the Potomac watershed. And so that's how we began in 1940, and that's why we're celebrating our 85th anniversary today. In 1970, ICPRB's compact was amended to include water resources, such as water supply and related land use. The signatory jurisdictions are Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and the District of Columbia, but not the United States. The United States is not a signatory. It's really an entity that focuses on the state's needs, and the federal government participates by naming commissioners to the ICPRB. Importantly, ICPRB has no regulatory authority, but has been very influential over the years by doing a series of scientific reports that have influenced policy decisions. Next slide. So our major focus areas are drinking water and water resources, water quality. So you have the first one is water quantity, and then the second one would be water quality. The third one is aquatic life. Not only is the river a source of drinking water, but it's also an important source of aquatic life and vegetation. And then finally, we focus on communication and education to try to tell folks about the value of the Potomac River and to really use water wisely and use salt wisely, especially this time of year. Next slide. So water supply concerns began in the 1960s. So what happened was that you have a 1966 a historic Potomac River low flow. And that really got people's attention. Actually, I visited Washington, D.C. in 1966 and was shocked to see on the news a whole bunch of rocks, which they told me was Great Falls. But there was no water really going over Great Falls at the time. So the actual demand then was a major concern. How are we going to meet these demands? In 1977, there was a severe drought in the Virginia's Occoquan watershed, and the Army Corps of Engineers did a study, and they said, well, in order to meet forecasted demand, which you see on the purple line there, we would have to put in 16 major reservoirs, which meant that the entire C&O Canal would have been flooded. There would have been flooding all the way upstream to Harper's Ferry, and a lot of historic resources and great natural areas would have been flooded at the same time. So there was a lot of pushback of that 1963 study. So therefore, another concern was the focus. Next slide. But you see go back to that other slide. I'm sorry, I wanted to make one more point. So if you see there, the actual demand has been flat. And the reason for that is that forecasters never took into account that water usage may go, the per capita water usage may actually go down. And that was because of the introduction of low flow toilets, low flow appliances, water conservation measures, and other things that actually, as the population of the area increased, the actual demand remained flat. Next slide. So how do we respond to the water supply crisis? So the technical work that was done in the 1970s showed the benefit of a systems approach. If all the water suppliers worked together and coordinated their activities, we could squeeze more water out of the system. In 1978, the parties got together and developed the low flow allocation agreement that was signed in 1978. The United States, Maryland, Virginia, DC, Fairfax Water, and WSSC, which provides water to the Maryland suburbs, all got together and signed this low flow allocation agreement that really was what would happen if we got a severe drought of record and there was no water in the Potomac River. What would we do? How would we allocate the water? But the idea was that we don't want to trigger the low flow allocation agreement. And so we formed the ICPRB's special co-op section was established in 1979 to coordinate activities among all the water suppliers in the region. And in 1982, a formal cooperative system was established via the Water Supply Coordination Agreement and other agreements, WSCA. And the purpose of the WSCA was to try to avoid triggering the low flow allocation agreement. And there you see the Potomac River at the Little Falls Dam. Next slide. So co-op's responsibilities are drought monitoring and operations. When the flow at Point of Rocks falls below 2,000 cubic feet per second, co-op sends out daily email reports to stakeholders summarizing the flow, the weather, and the demand conditions. We also conduct drought exercises. We'll be doing a drought exercise next week, coordinating with the water suppliers and government agencies to better prepare for a drought. And we also put together a water supply outlook, which is a monthly report during the dry season. Now, the water supply study every 5 years is what Dr. Schultz is going to be talking about. But you can see that graph there that shows the dark blue line is the current water flow situation. Actually, you can see where we've gotten a lot of rain sometimes, but the rain has come in buckets, and that is washed off the land instead of seeping into the land. And we've had very dry conditions during the late summer and early fall. So we are currently in what we call daily drought monitoring because the flow of the river is about 2,000 cubic feet per second. And we've been in daily drought monitoring during the summertime for the last 3 years. So this has been a major concern for us because if we don't get the winter and spring rains, we could face difficulties in the coming year. Next slide. And I think I'd like to then turn it over to Dr. Sherry Schultz, who will talk about the future of water in the DC metro area. Dr. Schultz.
Thank you very much, Mike. I'm pleased to have an opportunity to talk about this study. It's been a major undertaking for about 1.5 years. We're lucky that we had a great team helping us make this study happen, including Sarah Ahmed, Alma Tusek, Stephanie Neumer, and Karen Benkala. So today I'm going to give an overview of the study. Why do we do it? What is this Washington Metropolitan Area Cooperative Water Supply System that Mike touched on? What have we included in the study, what components, and what our results are? So first, why do we do the study? I first need to say we conduct it on behalf of the 3 major water suppliers in our region. These 3 suppliers all have intakes in the Potomac River: Fairfax Water, Washington Aqueduct, who is a division of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and WSSC Water. We do the study because, first of all, it's required by the regional agreements Mike just talked about, the Low Flow Allocation Agreement and the Water Supply Coordination Agreement. But of course, the real reason we do it is because planning is essential. This study allows us to alert the water suppliers if we find indications that new resources need to be added to meet future demands. So a little bit about this cooperative system. On the right, you see pictures of two of the system's reservoirs. It's an interstate regional system. That makes it a bit rare. Again, the suppliers involved are Fairfax Water, who serves the Northern Virginia suburbs. Washington Aqueduct sells water to DC Water, who distributes it to the District of Columbia. And also Aqueduct sells water to Arlington, including the Pentagon. And WSSC Water serves the Maryland suburbs. The Water Supply Coordination Agreement that Mike just talked about requires that these suppliers cooperate and operate as a system during droughts, and that they conduct joint planning studies every 5 years, such as this study. And furthermore, the agreement specifies co-op as the technical and administrative support organization for the drought management and drought planning. And also, this system involves cost sharing for upstream reservoirs. Jennings-Randolph Reservoir in the far northwest corner of the basin, Little Seneca Reservoir nearby, and Savage Reservoir, also in the northwest. So this system was established more than 40 years ago, yet very few people are aware of its existence. Here's a map showing the resources of the system. About 75% of the system's water comes from the Potomac River. And on this map, you can see the oval shows you where approximately these suppliers' Potomac River intakes are located. They're all in one stretch of the river, which is why a cooperation is so essential. The remaining water, 25%, comes from off-Potomac reservoirs. The Fairfax Water's Occoquan Reservoir, you can see on the map, and WSSC's Patuxent reservoirs. And additionally, the shared reservoirs I just mentioned are used to release water in cases of drought, and that can augment river flow to satisfy needs if natural flow wouldn't be sufficient. We always keep our eye on not just the region's water needs, but environmental requirements. There is an environmental flow by at Little Falls Dam, located just at the farthest bottom stretch of the reach with the intakes. And that requirement is a minimum of 100 million gallons per day. So back to the study. What are our objectives? There's three pieces to the study. First of all, forecast water demands. And our forecast horizon is 2050 for this study. Our forecast is primarily based on demographic projections, but there are adjustments made for things that may change demands in the future. Rising temperatures may increase outdoor water use, that is, use of water for watering landscape, gardens, trees. And adjustments are also made in our calculations for continued adoption throughout the metro area of water-saving fixtures and appliances. Second, we forecast water availability. And we base this forecast first on historic availability, but we make adjustments for changes we foresee in the future. First of all, upstream users, including data centers, reduce water flow in the Potomac River at the metro area intakes. Secondly, we make adjustments for the impacts of rising temperatures. These may decrease stream flows in the future. The final piece is an assessment of the future reliability of the Washington Metropolitan Area Cooperative System. We do this using our planning model called PRISM, which simulates water availability, and system operations. In this assessment, we include two planned future reservoirs, Fairfax Water's Edgeman Reservoir and Loudon Water's Milestone Reservoir. So first, forecasts of annual water demands. We have demographic forecasts from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments through 2050. And as I said, we make two adjustments: increases of demands in the future due to rising temperatures and decreases of demands due to water-saving fixtures and appliances. Here in the map, you can see the service areas of the three major suppliers: Fairfax Water, Washington Aqueduct, and WSSC Water. And you also see the service area of a new growing supplier, Loudoun Water, to the northwest. The forecast of annual demands is a very data-intensive, complex endeavor, and it was led by Sarah Ahmed. We forecast for three water use categories or units. Those are single-family households, multifamily households, that would be apartments, and employees. And employee water use represents use by businesses and government agencies, everything that's not residential household use. Our data sources and inputs include billing data from the water suppliers that allows us to estimate how much water is being used currently by, for example, a single-family household. The Metropolitan Washington Council of Government demographic forecasts give us the number of households and employees in the future. And some other factors go into this calculation. The final formula we use is fairly simple: forecasted demand for each category, say single-family households, is simply our estimated unit unit use times the forecasted future number of units. And here's a graph of our results. This graph shows Washington metropolitan area population, both actual from the census and forecasted by COG. It shows actual water demand and forecasted water demand, forecasted by this study. And here you see the flattening of demands since 1990 that Mike talked about, no increase really. And also this graph shows the forecast that Mike talked about by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in 1963 that really started all of this, the forecast that demands were really going to be exceeding available water in the future. I also show here our margin of uncertainty. This is a margin of uncertainty of 1 standard error from our forecast, and we use that to create scenarios of future demands. Next, we do forecasts of water availability. And our starting point is the daily historic record of regional river and stream flows. We're really fortunate in our area. This is a long settled area and we're data rich. We have measured river flows in the Potomac River starting in 1896. So the graph to the right shows monthly river flows at Point of Rocks, Maryland, which is somewhat upstream of the metropolitan area. And it also shows 4 years that are important to us, drought years. 1930 was a very long drought that occurred during the Dust Bowl era, and it's the drought of record for our system. It's the most stressful drought for our system if it were to reoccur. The drought of 1966, which Mike actually saw a bit when he was visiting as a child, is the drought with the lowest recorded daily Potomac River flow. And then 2 droughts in 1999 and 2002 occurred after the regional system was put in place, and we consider those moderate droughts. But as I mentioned, we take this daily historic time series and we alter it in 2 ways. We reduce flows to reflect the effects of upstream consumptive use of water, and we alter flows due to projections of what a changing climate would do to stream flows. So I'm going to talk about those 2 alterations, what we do to estimate how we make those 2 alterations. First of all, upstream consumptive use. consumptive use of water is water that is withdrawn from a stream, river, or aquifer, and then not returned to the watershed. Actually, most water withdrawn is returned to the watershed, but some is not. And that use that's not returned reduces downstream river flow. And we're interested in how river flows are reduced at Washington metropolitan area intakes. So in the current study I'm talking about now, there were updates made to estimate consumptive use, not including data centers. And there, our starting point was the most recent ICPRB withdrawal and consumptive use database, which compiles withdrawal data from all of the basin states. For data center use, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail, we used data from suppliers, assumptions on cooling technologies, and regional energy forecasts. So the pie chart shows a breakdown of current upstream consumptive use, and you can see the major users in the basin. Irrigation and livestock are big, so agricultural use dominates. Self-supplied domestic use, that is houses upstream on their own individual wells, is 8%. Public water supply is 9%. And you don't see data centers on the pie chart. You'll see in a minute that currently their upstream use is negligible. I wanted to talk a little bit about what was done on data centers in our study, and this effort was led by Dr. Alma Tusek. You may know that Virginia and Loudoun County, Virginia, sometimes called Data Center Alley, is the world's largest concentration of data centers. Prince William County is not so large, but it's growing. Data centers are actively being developed in Prince William. In Maryland, there are upcoming developments of data centers. And why was Loudoun County why did it draw so many data centers? Well, here are some factors for people citing data centers. They're interested in sufficient power and cooling. They need reliable electricity, in other words, and they need either access to water for cooling, or cooler climates are helpful, low hazard risks. They need connectivity with the World Wide Web, fiber networks, internet exchange points, and of course costs. Low costs and incentives help. Affordable land, tax breaks, streamlined permitting. So here's a map of current data center locations in the Potomac Basin, mostly in the metro area and mostly in Virginia. So our goal was to estimate water use by data center, that is direct water use. We excluded indirect use for power generation, which is of course important, but because of our geographic focus on the Potomac Basin, and because power may be generated outside of the basin, we did not try to estimate indirect use. And the results that we find are sensitive to a lot of assumptions, and especially assumptions on cooling methods. There are water-intensive cooling methods, and this can be some combination of evaporative and non-evaporative cooling. And then there are non-water intensive methods, air cooling. Water intensive methods are cheaper, but air cooling uses less water, of course. And then some facilities use hybrid methods. What about data center consumptive use? Our study uses forecasted power demand to estimate data center growth. So at the bottom of this slide, you see the formula that's used in our study. You can read the section on data centers to see all of the assumptions that are made, but this field is sort of in its infancy, and we were really fortunate to have great data from the water suppliers, especially Loudoun Water, Prince William County, and also Fairfax County. So estimates were made of water use per unit power, WUP. And to do this, we used data from the suppliers on water use and backup generator capacities from a Virginia database. The suppliers didn't actually have data on power usage at each of these facilities. One of the assumptions we made had to do with consumptive use factor for water cooling. Remember, water cooling may be completely evaporative, which would be 100% consumptive use, or some of it may just be passed through closed loop water cooling. So we made the assumption of 75% consumptive use, and that was based on supplier data that we had. Estimates of current data center consumptive use. So we really wanted to estimate this for upstream areas, because for the Washington metropolitan area, demand was estimated by other methods in our study. But Alma 2 also did estimates for the metro area because that's where most of the data centers are located. The result was 4 million gallons per day on average and 14.3 million gallons per day peak use within the metro area. In upstream areas, data center use right now is really negligible. 0.1 million gallons per day average, 0.3 million gallons per day peak day. And that's compared to non-data center consumptive use of about 100 million gallons per day right now. How about the future? To estimate the future, we wanted to reflect the uncertainty in future technology. We have averages about current technology use, but we're uncertain about how that may evolve in the future. So 3 scenarios were devised based on assumed future ratio of water cooling to air cooling, a high, medium, and low scenario. And the results that you'll see in a minute are all based on the medium scenario, that is 60% water cooling facilities and 40% air-cooled facilities. And then we also, and as I mentioned, we estimated future water use by future data center power use, and this was from PJM forecasts. There are two PJM service areas in the Potomac Basin, the Allegheny Power Service, and they were forecasting about 35% growth, and the Dominion area where 135% growth is being forecasted. So, results for future consumptive use. For the Washington metropolitan area in 2050, and this is the medium scenario, 22.2 million gallons per day was the average estimate, and 80.5 million gallons per day was the peak day estimate. For upstream areas, still data center use is fairly modest, 4.7 billion gallons per day on average, and 16.8 million gallons per day peak day. And note that non-data center average use is 113 million gallons per day. So finally, the outcome. Currently, water use by data centers is modest at the basin scale, but it is emerging as a distinct new water use sector that we really hadn't been aware of and hadn't done calculations for in the past. Future impact, substantial growth is likely by 2050, but it's still only about 5% of all consumptive use in upstream areas. And outcomes hinge on cooling technology adoption and on power demand trajectories. We make some recommendations in the report, and they include improved transparency. We always want new data. So what would be very helpful for water management is on-site consumptive use data at the daily time scale. This would allow us to understand better how peak day use is actually going to translate to changes in river flow. And finally, discussion and investigation of mitigation options. Could the data centers have a bit of on-site storage to smooth out peak day use? Could off-site storage be used to mitigate withdrawals of data centers? The other adjustment we made to historic stream flows has to do with the impact of changing meteorological conditions. How will stream flow change? We expect rising temperatures to increase variability in stream flow. But our results show that there will be a disparate impact on wet years versus dry years. So our approach to how stream flows will change because of changing temperatures and precipitation is now available in a publication in the Journal of the American Water Resources Association. It's free online, and the article is called "Is Hot Drought a Risk in the U.S. Mid-Atlantic? A Potomac Basin Case Study." So this journal article describes in detail our approach, but what we do is we use a large set of projected temperature and precipitation from global models. People around the world have constructed physics-based models of how temperature and precipitation will change in the future. And we use as large a set as we can, as is available for our region. To estimate how stream flow will change because of changing precipitation and temperature, we use a simple empirical model, a statistical model response function that predicts mean annual stream flow from mean annual precipitation and temperature. Our analyses are based on 30-year time periods. We need a large time period to have sufficient sample sizes to compute these statistics we're interested in. And we use non-parametric methods to calculate statistics. For example, river flow in a future 100-year drought. What is that going to look like? Is it going to be higher or lower than occurred in the past? Here's what we found by comparing observed meteorological and hydrologic data with our model results. The dark line in this graph is observed precipitation in the Potomac Basin. And the gray bands are ranges of model predictions, of global model predictions, downscale to the Potomac Basin. The model predictions we're using are the latest that are available, CMIP6. That stands for Coupled Model Intercomparison Project Phase 6. So we see in observed past data, there's now a statistically significant increase in precipitation, annual precipitation. In the period 2010 through 2023, we see a 10% increase. This can be compared with the CMIP6 results, a 5.7% increase for the first 30-year period, 2010 through 2039, and then 10% and 13% for later 30-year periods. So precipitation is projected to rise in the Potomac Basin. Temperature is also projected to rise. Here's again observed data. We do see a statistically significant increase for the most recent observed period, 2010 through 2023, of 1 degree Fahrenheit. The global model projections actually are increasing faster than we've observed so far, about 3 degrees Fahrenheit for the near-term period 2010 through 2039, 5 degrees and 7 degrees for later periods. And what about river flow? There, we do not see any statistically significant trend in Potomac River flow actually beginning in 2030 and extending through 2023. But we do see in our analyses changes in a future extreme drought year. We actually estimate changes throughout the probability distribution of annual stream flows. But for a 100-year drought, we see an 11% decrease in flow in our near-term period, 2010 through 2039. That rises to a 13% decrease later and a 29% decrease in the last period, 2070 through 2099. So outcomes of this meteorological change analysis. Again, disparate impacts on future dry versus wet years. Future flows will be lower than in the past in dry years, but higher than in the past in wet years. There is a caveat. We have a disappointing match between our most recent data on temperature and precipitation and the CMIP-6 projections for the near term, but that may change as more data is collected. And to capture uncertainty, from our streamflow response function, we construct three scenarios: high flow, medium flow, and lower flow. And these represent the sensitivity of stream flow to rising temperatures. So, our assessment of system reliability in the future. First of all, I've been noting the planning scenarios that we use. We use planning scenarios because that's an accepted method in water resource planning. Scenarios can provide a plausible range of results for vulnerability assessments, and they're well suited for the adaptive management approach that we use in our region, in that we do our planning assessments every 5 years and update the data. So we reflect the uncertainty in annual demands by 3 scenarios and the uncertainty in the impact of meteorological change by 3 scenarios. And here are finally our results for the reliability assessment for these 9 scenarios. We used the ICPRB's Potomac Reservoir and River Simulation Model to put everything together that I've talked about, and to simulate daily water demands, daily water availability, system reservoir operations, and to output system reliability. So first, the probability of water supply system reliability in a given year, say in 2030, there is a 99% to 100% chance, depending on scenario, that the system will be reliable. That's pretty good. Not good enough for the water suppliers, but pretty good. In 2045 and 2050, the reliability for the worst case scenarios drops to 95%. And we're always measuring how well our system will respond to an extreme drought similar to the drought of 1930, perhaps worse because of meteorologic change. And here are the results for system reliability during extreme drought for our 9 scenarios, and also for 3 scenarios just using historic flows and not considering meteorologic change. So for 2030, you can see that 4 out of 9 of the scenarios indicate that there's going to be water shortages. By 2050, 6 of the 9 scenarios indicate there'll be water shortages. What would a water shortage look like? We might miss the 100 million gallon per day environmental flow by at Little Falls Dam. There might be emergency water use restrictions. But in worst case scenarios, there may not be water flowing from people's taps. So I think Mike is going to talk about strategies for mitigating the problems that we see based on study results. But first, I want to say, if you have any questions, you can contact any of the co-op team, Sarah Ahmed, Alma Tusek or myself. And the report is now available online.
Thank you, Dr. Schultz. I'll be brief. We didn't want to leave people with the idea that nothing is being done to address these vulnerabilities in the water supply system in the DC area. But you can see by the report that the region's water supply could fail to meet the needs of the region as soon as 2030 in 4 of the 9 scenarios that Dr. Schultz spoke about. And we can no longer ignore the fact that parts of the DC region have only one source of drinking water, the Potomac River, and just a one-day backup of water supply. In short, it's climate change combined with the increase in demand that may be putting the whole system at risk. In 2024, ICPRB commissioned another study that calculated the economic and fiscal costs of water supply disruption in the National Capital Region. And according to that report, within the first month of losing access to the waters of the Potomac River, the DC region could see a loss of almost 15 billion, that's billion with a B, in gross regional product and hundreds of millions in tax losses. And that doesn't even consider the national security implications of the seat of the federal government and the home of the Pentagon running out of water. So what is being done to mitigate this monumental risk? Now, some short-term solutions are already in the works, and DC Water is investigating the possible purification and reuse of effluent from the Blue Plains Water Treatment Facility for their service area. But what about a long-term regional solution? The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Baltimore District, initiated a DC metropolitan area backup water supply feasibility study last fall, which could lead the way to possible regional long-term solutions. Nonetheless, the feasibility study was paused during the recent government shutdown, but thanks to Congresswoman Norton, the House passed H.R. 4553 that included $1.8 million to continue funding the feasibility study. And this week, thanks to Senators Van Hollen, Kane, and Warner, the Senate Appropriations Committee is considering a draft bill that also includes $1.8 million for the feasibility study. Of course, these are just the first steps in a long legislative process. Moreover, these are two earmarks. And if the Congress adopts a continuing resolution, as it has done in the past, instead of these regular appropriation bills, these earmarks would disappear. And finally, given the possibility of another government shutdown on January 30th, 2026, nothing is guaranteed. Our release of the 2025 Washington Metropolitan Area Water Supply Study highlights the need to expedite the feasibility study so that we can reduce the vulnerability of the DC region from a cutoff of drinking water because of drought and also contamination events that may be both accidental and deliberate. Thank you. And now we'll open up for questions, and I'll turn it over to Renee to field those questions. Thank you.
You, Mike. So I just gave everyone the ability to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like to, or you can put your question in the chat. I would ask, we've got a pretty big group, so if you do want to ask a question, please raise your hand so that I can call on you if you would like to speak up. And I know that was a lot of dense information. So while you're kind of gathering your thoughts and thinking about what questions you have, I'll start off with a question for Dr. Schultz. I'm curious, what was the most surprising finding from this report?
We were surprised at the finding for 2030, the near-term finding. In past studies, we haven't seen a near-term vulnerability. It was because of the climate change projection for the near term, and that's much more harsh than in our last study.
Thank you. I don't see any hands raised or any. Oh, there we go. Here's a question. Says, thank you for the critical work. The report shows upstream data centers account for about 5% of average summertime consumptive use by 2050 based on grid-connected energy forecasts. Given the massive acceleration of AI and region rushes to supply energy, do you see this 5% figure will increase significantly in the future? What is ICPRB's recommendation for data center operation in drought conditions?
We do have an indication that data center consumptive use is going to increase. Again, we had 3 scenarios because adoption of cooling technologies, the mix of cooling technologies we're going to see upstream is very uncertain. Certainly air cooling, if air cooling can be encouraged, that's going to help consumptive use. Both Maryland and Virginia actually have mitigation regulations on upstream consumptive use to keep consumptive use down for suppliers that are directly withdrawing from the Potomac or its tributaries. And those regulations ask the suppliers to obtain some mitigation storage to help increase river flows if on maximum days from data centers. So we think that we're hoping that those regulations stay in place, and we're hoping that storage solutions can be found. We do think actually that one possibility is investment by data centers in the solutions that Mike is talking about. This would help mitigate their use of water in the future.
Thank you. Here's some more questions coming in. The map of data centers looked like it didn't include the true number of data centers. They are offering their help. And who is giving you the data center water usage? It is hard to get those figures. So I think you did cover this a little bit in your talk, but you want to explain how you came up with the data center usage figures?
So Alma Tusek is the expert in this, but we had water use data from Loudoun Water, Prince William Water, and Fairfax Water. So as far as upstream use, I am not sure how the water use was estimated, but Dr. Seck will be happy to answer questions about that.
Dr. Seck, did you want to come off mute and answer that at all? She was another study author. I don't know if she can. Okay. Thank you for that answer. Okay, I'm going to answer one more from the chat. Can you clarify that not meeting needs is without any mitigation, such as water reuse restrictions? And if so, is there any pending work on types of water restriction measures and effectiveness?
Our modeling of the system does include water use restrictions. Water use restrictions are managed by the Washington Metropolitan Area Council of Governments, and there is a schedule of restrictions you can see on their website. So we have estimates of how those restrictions will actually affect demands, and that is considered in the study. But of course, other mitigation options that we know are available are not considered in the study. That was because the Corps of Engineers is conducting their feasibility study, and we thought it was appropriate to wait until they make their determination of the best alternatives before modeling them.
So hopefully we'll have that information by the time the next study comes around in 5 years from now. Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask Charles Paulin to come off mute and ask your question.
Hey everyone, thanks for doing this. I guess I just wanted to try and drill down maybe the significance of this a little bit more. I guess I don't want to be like alarmist, I guess, but you mentioned how some people may be able, will be turning on taps at some point and may not be able to have water coming through. I guess has that kind of assessment happened before, and has there been anything that maybe led to that assessment previously, or?
So I think you're talking about our 2030 result. It's a very low probability result. And no, we have not in past studies found a near-term vulnerability like that. And again, this is because of projections of rising temperature in the near term. And there is a caveat, as I mentioned in the presentation, that actually projected temperature rise is not actually being seen yet, so it's not matching observed data very well. So that leads us to be a little bit uncertain about the validity of that result. But we need to take it seriously.
Thank you.
So somebody asked for the water use restriction plans, so I included a link to COG's response plan, so you can check that out. And then Kevin asked which organization decides and enforces water use from the Potomac under very low flow conditions. That's, I believe, also COG, correct?
Well, yes, and I think the COG jurisdictions all enforce water use restrictions themselves.
So there's a drought, the drought committee, something like that, that will come together to make that decision. And if somebody from COG is on here that can correct me with whatever the committee's name is, that would be great.
I think it's the Drought Coordination Technical Committee makes a recommendation to the Drought Coordination Committee, which is the administrative officers of the jurisdictions, and then they all get on board with the restrictions.
Thank you. One more question. Is there any assessment of how groundwater levels will change?
We do not have that. That's not a component of this study, but there is a publication. I'll put it in the chat by Dr. Seck and one of an ICPRB intern a couple summers ago. So that's our initial effort to address that question.
Dr. Seck, did you want to come off mute? I see your hand raised for a second there.
Yes, I just wanted to add a bit on the question related to data center water usage and the actual numbers of data centers. I think that's a great question. To my knowledge, there's actually no national repository or central database of, the exact number of data centers in the country or in the region. However, because of our relationship with the water utilities, we were able to get data centers water use for some of the service areas in the Washington metropolitan area. And that is the data that we've used to extrapolate to areas outside of the Washington metropolitan area. And then when it comes to the actual location of data centers, the data source that we found to be most useful in this case was the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality air permit database, which was curated by JLARC, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission. So that's a database of 100 data centers in Virginia, and that we've used to estimate the power usage of data centers in Virginia. And that was basically the basis of the that water use per power number that we then extrapolated to the rest of the basin. So yes, it would be certainly very helpful to have one database of where data centers are located. I think there are efforts on this that are currently ongoing. The National Renewable Energy Lab, they put out a new data center map recently with the power usage for certain areas. And actually, I went in and compared our data with, so our data is based on the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality permits, and I compared that to the National Renewable Energy Lab new database that just came out months ago, and the power usage for our area were very similar in the order of 100 megawatt. So I'm pretty confident that what we've captured in the Washington metro area, at least, is consistent with different sources that exist out there. But certainly, we would be happy to, exchange notes with any organization or any individual who have information on data centers. This is a fast-moving topic, and in future studies, we look forward to re-evaluating the analysis and adding any more relevant data that will be available at that time.
Thank you. That helped clarify some stuff. Thank you. We have a question from John Grace. Water loss can be a significant component of water demand for large water systems. Will this component be part of a feasibility study or future reliability studies? That's a great question, John.
Thanks, John. It is always a part of our reliability studies. We do get water loss data from all of the suppliers, but it's certainly an interesting question about the feasibility study. I don't think it's been a proposed alternative, but maybe it should be. I think water loss, we represent it by supplier, and I think for the district, for example, it may, well, I think for the district in WSSC, it may range from 20 to 30%. That's a lot of water.
Right. I think that wraps up our questions, and people are starting to drop off because we're a little over our time. So with that, I will thank our speakers, Michael Nartalili and Dr. Sherry Schultz. Be sure to sign up for any of our future webinars. We have a lot of great ones coming up. And have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.